listening to the Jersey Guys Podcast, the show that talks about hard rock, heavy metal, AOR, and West Coast music. In-depth conversation and special guests are always on tap, so settle in and turn it up. Now, here are your hosts, Tom and Mark.
Hey, Josh, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah. Hey, I'm glad that I am,
Yeah. Well, I know Tom was trying to schedule this with you last week, and you were kind of delaying us a little bit because you had NAMM coming up. So how was NAMM?
It was great. Again, it wasn't really the way it's supposed to be because it used to be in January, and then all the bands and companies could attend. But because it was moved up to April and last year was June because of COVID, it's not the same. But coming next year, January, it's going to get back to the schedule. So it should be good again.
Oh, okay. That's something I've always wanted to go to. I mean, I remember back in the day, I used to read Metal Edge magazine religiously, and they always used to cover it, and all the pictures and everybody that was there. And I was like, I got to get to this one day. And I just never have, but I'd love to go one day.
It was great. I remember in Chicago, because I grew up in Chicago. So it was in Chicago. That's where I met Neal Schon with my other guitar player, Derek Frigo, in the band Le Mans that I had.
Yeah.
And we met him. And we also saw Eddie Van Halen and Valory Bertinelli. They were at the Kramer booth, and there was a bunch of people gathered there. But yeah, I mean, Chicago was great for NAMM. And then obviously it happens also in Anaheim, and that was great too. Yeah.
Nice.
So I wanted to take you back to the first Storm album and my first introduction to you and the band. I saw you guys at the Nassau Coliseum in 1991 opening for Bryan Adams. Do you remember the?
Of course.
Of course you do. If I do, you certainly do. And that was my first introduction to the Storm album. I had actually known you previously from that Le Mans album. I'm going to ask you a question. Do you remember something specific about that show, or maybe part of that tour with the band?
Well, I remember the tour, the Nassau Coliseum. I kind of remember, but I don't know how many shows we had done earlier in the tour when we finally got to Nassau Coliseum. Because we started in March.
Right. And I'm trying to remember what time. I still have the shirt and I have the ticket stub too. I don't remember what the exact date of the tour was, but I do remember that Kevin Chalfant had a bad throat.
Exactly. Okay. So what happened was that, we were rehearsing in California here, and the weather was beautiful. And then we started our tour in Cleveland. And then it was winter time basically in the East.
Right. And
so he caught a bad, a bug. But I remember, how when you're on tour with a big band, the big band usually comes to your dressing room and they say, hey, you guys, great to have you on tour and on board, and let's have a great show. It took Bryan 6-7 days to finally come into our dressing room to finally say, hey guys, what's up, right? And Kevin was sick, and then he just jetted out as soon as Kevin said something like, okay, I'm sorry, but I'm under the weather. Boom, he was gone. Yeah, right. But nice. Yeah, I mean, that was our first big tour, right? I mean,
yeah, no, I remember because I was a huge Bryan fan, but also the Storm album I loved. So that was a must-see show for me. And a friend of mine who owned a record store back then had a Ticketmaster machine, and he got me seats third or fourth row from the stage. And I remember when you guys came on, Chalfant did one song. He didn't sound right, and then he said, "I apologize, I'm sick."
Hmm.
But you guys still sounded good, and I remember the show very vividly. And I was curious to see what your recollection of was it from over 30 years ago.
Yeah, that was my recollection, that Kevin was sick, and then it took Bryan all that time to finally come in. And then when he came in, he, noticed that Kevin was sick, so he didn't want to catch the same shit as he did, so he split.
Yeah, well, Bryan
Yeah.
Adams at that point was massive, like in the States.
Okay, let me tell you something. That's why we got the tour, is because back in the day in 80 something, Herbie Herbert, which was Journey's manager,
Mm-hmm.
they gave Bryan Adams a chance to open up for Journey, right? At the Oakland Coliseum and all these places. And so this was basically Bryan Adams's thank you for that, for us to open up for
Interesting.
Bryan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I got to ask you, how was it when that 1991 the debut comes out? How was it with Interscope Records, because they were kind of a brand new label at that point, right?
Yeah.
How did that whole deal come about?
Well, we had we were for the first rock band on Interscope. So, God, I could go back, but I'm not. I'm just going to take it from where we had a little bit. I was working at a horse ranch. I was working at a horse ranch in Petaluma, California. And it seemed that all my friends were making it in bands and stuff. And I'm just going, God, Jesus, when can I get my turn? And so Kevin asked me to play on some demos with Greg Raleigh. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, okay. And so I went there, did some, like 3 songs, I think we did. And Greg liked my play, and he goes, wow, you sound like Neal. And I said, yeah, I don't really read music or anything, but I play from my heart and all that. And so I did the 3 songs, and I went back to the ranch to work 3 days a week because I was living there. And so one day he calls me up. He goes, Josh, we got a meeting with Herbie and Bo Hill, that he was with Interscope Records. And I go, okay, well, why do you want me to go? He goes, you're in the band, right? And I'm like, oh my God, really? I'm in the band? So we had this meeting at this, like an office with an oval table. And I'm looking around, I see Steve Smith, Ross Valory, Greg Raleigh, Kevin and me, Herbie Herbert, Bo Hill. And I'm like, oh my God, it felt like a dream. And I was pinching myself going, Jesus, this is real. So Bo Hill said that, yeah, we wanted to sign a rock band to Interscope. So Herbie had tapes of various bands, but he gave them one of our demos. And he goes, wow, I love this band. Yes, I want to sign them. So that was we signed right there and then at the Nocturne Studios, Herbie Herbert. And yeah, that was the beginning.
Nice. What was it like recording the first album?
Well, we went to Skywalker Ranch, right? George Lucas. And it was great because my drive, it was different than in LA or something where, there's so many distractions, you're partying and all that. But here it was like, you go through the back roads to Skywalker, and it's just trees. It looks like you're in Switzerland or something. And then the gates open up, and you drive in, and you stop at the the patrol guy says, okay, come on in. And then you go in, and there's the huge studio Skywalker. And it was a dream. It was a dream because Bo Hill said, wow, this is an amazing place. Yeah, it was my first huge album. Plus, you're recording at Skywalker Ranch, and you're like, holy moly, does it get any better than this?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was great.
We'll go back a little bit from the. How did you go? You're a Chicago guy, right? How did you get from Chicago out to Northern California?
Okay, so I had my band Le Mans, and actually, Randy Castillo from Ozzy's band used to be in our band. And so he left to go to do a tour or something with Autograph. Do you remember that band Autograph?
Sure.
Yes.
Right. So he did that. And then from there, he went to Lita Ford, and Lita Ford, he went to Ozzy. So we lost him, but we got this guy that used to come and watch our rehearsals all the time. And then they became friends, really good, Randy and Kenny. Kenny was in Cacophony with Jason Becker and Marty Friedman. Mm-hmm. But anyway, we rehearsed and everything. And then I saw this a Guitar Player magazine, and there was a page in there in an interview with Mike Varney. And he goes, yeah, I'm looking for the hottest bands in California to do my second album with. And I'm going, wow, I think we're pretty good. Right? Derek was like Eddie Van Halen. I was like Gary Moore meets Neal Schon. And, you know, we complimented each other really good. And so I called Guitar Player magazine, and I got Mike Varney's number. And I called him up and I said, hey, listen, I'm in a band, Le Mans, here in Chicago. I think we're pretty good. He goes, well, go record something and send it to me. So we did that. I sent it to him, and he goes, wow, you guys are pretty good. Can you go to a professional recording studio and record that one song? So we did. And he put it on this US Metals albums that he had out, right? This was the second one. So our band was on there. And then he said, listen, if you guys want to be rock stars and all that, you should do an album, but you got to come here to, you know, to San Francisco and do it. And so we did. We said yes. So we went there. He hooked us up with Peter Marino, which was the singer in Le Mans. And we did the CD or the album. And then we moved back to Chicago, and he goes, you guys, if you want to, that's when he said, if you want to be rock stars and stuff, you got to be here. So Derek Frigo, which was in Enough's Enough. Do you remember the band Enough's Enough?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Exactly. Me and him were the guitar players. And that's another story. Me having to babysit that guy, but a lovely guy, really nice. So Derek, Kenny, our drummer, and a light guy that we had that looked like Sting, we all put our stuff in a U-Haul, and we drove here, you know, to California, to San Francisco. And then we got hooked up again with Peter Marino, and we started doing shows, opening up for the Joe Perry Project and Lita Ford and Rat. And it was great. So that's how it started.
Nice.
Derek Frigo was a huge favorite of mine, and as much as I loved Enough's Enough when he was out of the band, it was never the same because he really made them. It was Beatles pop with like this crazy off-the-wall guitar player that just made the sound of that band. Yeah,
Derek was a sweetheart, and I remember meeting him. He was 14 years old, and this guy had brought him over to my place, and he started playing, and I'm like, holy shit, this kid is pretty. I used like Eddie Van Halen and stuff, right? And then he saw me playing. He's like, good. Holy, yeah. But then he was also in awe of me because I was kind of like a Neal Schon, Gary Moore kind of player. So we got a band together. But he was a kid, and his parents were rich. They were living on Lakeshore Drive. His mom was an actress in Beverly Hills.
I had heard that he had family in Hollywood. Yeah.
Brittany Frigo. And his dad was one of the only jazz violinists left.
Really?
And and they lived on a high rise in front of Lakeshore Drive. I mean, he grew up rich. But I had to basically, you know, every day that we had rehearsal, I had to hunt him down. He'd be playing video games at the corner place and this and that. And all his friends were little rich kids and stuff. So I go, Derek, we got rehearsal. We got to go. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway.
Well, he was apparently always a handful from what I've recollected.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was weird because Greg Raleigh used to tell me the same thing with Neal Schon, that he had to go pick him up. And I mean, he was 14, 15 years old with Santana.
Oh, yeah.
So he had to go pick him up and all this stuff. And, you know, so I understand that whole thing.
He was, I believe, 17 years old at the Woodstock show.
Yes, exact.
Yes, Neal Schon.
No, Neal didn't play Woodstock.
He didn't play Will. Oh,
no,
yeah.
no, he came in on the third CD, with the hand, and they had already done Woodstock in 1969. Really? Yeah, Neal didn't show up till 71, 72 on the third Santana album.
Okay.
Yeah, believe me, I know, because I sat with Greg and everything, and we talked about everything. I was a fan of Greg, so I could, I was living with him, so I could really every night talk to him about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
got some good stories.
I wanted to ask you a question that's always been intriguing to me with the first Storm album. Whose idea was to put In the Raw as the third song on the album?
I guess it was Greg and Kevin, and also Beau Hill.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know why.
It doesn't fit the whole album. It's the one song that, it's a classic AOR album with this cock rock song stuck at the third song. And it was like, I not only myself, but everybody I used to talk to was like, what the hell is that song doing? It's batting third in the batting order.
I understand.
Like the 12th song on the album.
Yeah, no, I understand totally. But Greg wanted kind of like a ZZ Top-ish kind of song.
Right. But
but that song, God, girls used to come, because I'm the one that goes in the raw.
Oh, is it real?
It's me. So girls used to come up to me to say it, and first of all, I didn't really like that song that much. But then when they came up to me, but when they came up to me and to tell them, "Oh, please do that,"
well, it was a chick magnet for you, yeah,
exactly.
Do your best, Barry White.
Right. Okay. So you had no complaints with it.
Right. And we would sometimes, how guys are after, like, when they're on tour and stuff, they go to strip shows, right? So it was me sometimes. And what's the guitar player in Bryan Adams? Kevin.
Of course, he had the same guitar player for 100 years too.
Yeah, him.
Guy with the short brown hair.
Yeah.
Right. And then some of the roadies and stuff, we would go to some strip joints afterwards, and the girls would be dancing to In the Raw.
In the Raw, yeah.
Okay. I'm like, what? And
right.
then, of course, the roadies would go, "This is the guitar player in the," and then they would all come to me and all that stuff. But yeah, so the video for that song, which we never did, was really cool because it would have been a girl with nothing but wearing cowboy boots, which is the song, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she would be walking around and all that, and things would obstruct her, like a newspaper would be there in positioning with her breast and a coffee cup, and every time you saw her, there would be something where you couldn't see her breast and stuff, but you always see her with cowboy boots. It was great, and so that was the whole idea for In the Raw. And then we had not You're Gonna Miss Me, but what's the other song? Call Me. Mm-hmm. AT&T wanted to do a commercial with that song.
Really?
You can call
mm-hmm.
me, right?
Wow.
I mean, it would have been great.
Oh yeah.
And it didn't work out. And then the Backdraft movie with Kurt Russell and Robert De Niro came out that same year, and we were supposed to have that other song. Oh, it's on that CD, but it's a really cool song. I can't remember the name of it. Yeah.
Show Me the Way?
No.
I Want You Back?
No.
Still Loving You?
Yes, Still Loving You. That song was supposed to be on Backdraft.
Really?
Yeah.
That was a big movie.
Yes, and it was Interscope movie. Because they were a movie production company too.
Yeah.
And actually, that was one of their first movies with Backdraft. But they wanted to change some of the lyrics in the songs, and Greg had a problem with that. And I'm like, Jesus Christ!
Oh yeah, just change the lyrics and get
just change the lyrics to it. I mean, we have a chance to the storm on this song. So we lost out on AT&T. We lost out on Backdraft. That In the Raw, another video that could have been kind of cool. And I understand what you mean. Huge A&R album, and we have this one song in there. But yeah, that was the story within the row.
Now, you mentioned Gary Moore. I'm a massive Gary Moore fan. We just had
Yes.
Neil Carter from his band on the
Oh.
podcast a few weeks ago. How big of an influence was he to you?
Huge. I've been following Gary since he was in Skid Row, back,
Wow.
way back. And then check this out. When I was, God, a young guy, it was my birthday, and my friend took me to go see Queen in Chicago.
And Thin Lizzy opened up for them.
Exactly. Thin Lizzy opened up, and I saw this guitar player. He was playing high up and stuff, and I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Totally fine.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm like, holy, and that was my introduction to Gary Moore. And then then obviously I went to record stores going, okay, so I saw Skid Row. Then he had his own CDs with Cozy Powell, great drummer. God, I'm so sad.
He had
that
Ian Pace in
died.
his band for a while
Ian
too.
Pace, yeah, exactly. And then I got all his albums and stuff, and then I was a huge Gary Moore fan, right? Because he was such a blues player. Well, he was a rock player before, and then he said probably, I'm going to go this way, and he started doing blues, which was great.
Yeah.
Actually, when that song came out, Gary Moore, which a blues,
Still got the blues.
Yes, Greg loved that song, and he goes, "Man, have you?" I said, "Yeah, I heard that song, especially when Gary is doing a note and he clicks from the bass pickup to the treble pickup."
Mm-hmm.
That was beautiful because you see the transition. You can hear it if you're a musician, a guitar player, that he changes pickups. And Greg always used to love that part. And oh my God, that's such a. And I always wanted.
He was a one of a kind. Out of that, all those '80s guitar players,
exactly.
There was something about him that stood out, in my opinion, from everybody else. He had a certain signature to him, the way he played, that was different from everybody else.
Exactly.
You talked about it, Tom, when we had Neil Carter on. It was funny because you got this guy, right, Thin Lizzy, and you talked about Skid Row, and then he didn't really hit his biggest, I guess, most popularity until he kind of went to the blues in America. That was when he had his most success in America, right?
He had a lot he actually had a lot of success with that in America. And before that, the 2 times that he toured here, he played little clubs in America. Nobody knew who he was
as a solo.
Right.
Yeah, but in the '80s, I mean, guys like us knew who he was, but that was about it. But the blues put him over the top.
Exactly. So check out this little story I have. So when I was a kid, so my favorite guitar player, I grew up with Neil. He was a huge inspiration. Gary Moore, amazing, but Alan Holdsworth was my favorite guitar player. So I go see him as a kid. I couldn't even get into the club. I ended up sneaking into the club through the fire escape and everything, right? And I sit down because this guy said, dude, I saw the most amazing guitar player. And I said, what do you mean? What makes him so amazing? And I was naming all these guitar players. He goes, he's better than all of them. So I had to go see this guy, right? So I sneak into the club. I saw him. There was a bass player, Tony Newton.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Tony Newton played in Tony Williams's Lifetime band with Alan Holdsworth. Tony Newton also played with Gary Moore.
Yes, he did. And the G-Force.
Exactly. And so here I'm now friends with Tony Newton, and I've done recordings with him, and I've sat down with him, and I've talked to him when they went to London with Van Halen and Black Sabbath. They did that whole tour with them. So Tony let me know a lot of stuff of Gary Moore too. Never met the guy, and I would have loved to have met Gary Moore. Amazing guitar player. Yeah.
I didn't know you were a big Holdsworth fan either. That's another
he's
guy.
My favorite guitar. I've met him. I met him that night that I first saw him with Tony Williams. I was peeing in the bathroom, and he slept right next to me. And I'm like, oh my God. I said, how do you play all that stuff? How do you, because it was a whole new way of playing where most guitar players are, staccato, right? Where they play with the right hands, picking. Holdsworth was all legato stuff with his left hand.
With his left hand,
like a violin player and a saxophone player. And I had never heard a style like that before. And I asked him that. I remember I was 17 years old or something. And in his British accent, he goes, oh, I just play with what I hear in my head. And I'm like, okay, thank you very much. That doesn't help me much. But I knew what he was saying. He was like, and he hated guitar playing. He wanted to be a saxophone player.
That's what I've always read about him. Yeah,
yes,
he really wasn't in his heart and soul to be a guitar player. Yeah.
Yes, and his dad, because they couldn't afford a saxophone player, got him a guitar.
Right.
And I mean, here is the most amazing guitar player who was like Van Halen's favorite guitar player, Joe Satriani, Steve Vai. They all like worship this guy. And he thought he wasn't that good, and he really didn't like the guitar play, sound.
And he did very little rock. I mean, he was...
in the beginning.
He was in a band called Tempest.
Exactly. I have the CDs here too.
Yeah.
And he was in UK.
And he was on the first UK album, which is tremendous album.
Right. And they opened up for Van Halen and everything. The crowd didn't really get it because it was progressive music.
Right.
But Eddie goes, holy shit.
Yes.
Who's that? And if you notice, Eddie Van Halen had a style kind of like, well, after he heard Holsworth, he was able to change from Clapton and all his heroes, Jimmy Page,
right,
to Alan Holsworth. And even though he didn't really get too much into it, because Eddie, the beauty about Eddie Van Halen was the fact that he was such a bitchin' guitar player, but at the same time, he could keep it melodic and hit all those like Jump, Panama, all those songs that
I agree.
You know, he was smart enough to do that, where guitar players like, you know, Yngwie and stuff, amazing.
I totally agree. A lot of his solos were very melodic.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just a lot of whittly diddly notes. His solos, by and large, were very melodic.
Yes. He knew what to play for the song, and he knew what the audience would like, girls and guys, right?
Yep,
where certain guitar players only favor guys. So you see a massive amount of guys out there. But with Van Halen and Journey, there were almost like more women than there were guys.
Yes.
So they're hitting the right, chord with that. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to move on to the second Storm album, which was Eye of the Storm. It didn't come out until 1995 on Music for Nations, but I think it was recorded a couple years earlier, right? What kind of happened with that, from the debut? You guys tour with Bryan Adams, have some success with some singles. And then what happened with the second album? You actually recorded it for Interscope?
Yes, then Interscope started moving to rap music, right? Like they had a deal with that Suge Knight guy. And they started changing. And so Beau Hill got fired, and anything that Beau Hill had to do with also went out the door, which was us. And we were so close to having a gold album. We were like just a couple of thousand units to be sold to be gold. And then we got dropped, man. And so we, I can't remember if we had already, well, no, Interscope paid for us to do a second album, which we did at Fantasy Studios, which was Creedence Clearwater back in the day, their studio in Berkeley. We did the second Storm album there with Nigel Green, which was Def Leppard, Mutt Lange's right-hand man.
Oh, okay.
So we got him to do the CD, and he came and did it. Great. The songs on there were great, but we didn't have Steve Smith anymore. We had Ron Wixell playing drums.
Right.
And we also had Bob Marlette still working with us. But then we finished the album and everything like that. But by that time, man, you had grunge, you had rap and stuff, which were dominating the radio. And so, I guess Interscope didn't know what to do with us. And I mean, they just said, here, we'll give you the album. You guys go try to find another label somewhere. And I mean, in one way, they didn't make us pay for it or anything like that. They just wrote it off as a tax, write-off. And they gave us the album. And we were, but before radio, what was it?
Music for Nations.
Yeah.
Yes, that was in England. But we had the album come out on another label from Seattle.
Miramar, was it?
Yes, Miramar, which is two different covers. If you notice, one has a different cover than the next. So again, it came out for Music for Nations, and but it really didn't go anywhere.
So Suge Knight didn't have a place for a Beau Hill band?
Right. If we could have did Storm Song, but we needed to rap them, right? No.
I mean, that's just that album. And it's funny because I talked with Tom and we were kind of debating this. It's like he loves the first and he got to see you guys live. So I certainly understand that. But I think that second album is what does it for me. I love that second album. The songs are so great.
A lot of fans, and even Frontier Records, which, right, it's the melodic record company that me and Kevin have been signed with. They said that is the best melodic rock album that they've ever heard.
Well, there you go, Tom.
We were talking about. I never saw it. I mean, I like it, but I prefer the debut. But I was telling Mark, it has a lot of people that think it's a better album than the debut.
Well, actually, I'm with you.
Okay,
actually, I'm with you. I prefer the first album because, it had my hero Steve Smith playing on drums.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, and Bo Hill. And the whole thing with the production and everything. But yes, the second album, obviously, I love too.
The second album, I think, kind of the band had more of its own personality. The first album was a full-on journey album. I mean,
like Replacement. Okay, you guys are gone now. We're going to take your replacement.
Right. It was a journey album, and the second album was, I think, the band had more of its own identity. I will definitely. That's right. We'll definitely say that. Yeah.
But on the second album, you have the song "To Have and to Hold," which I so many women come up to me. She goes, "Oh my God, I got married to that song." Right? Because the words on it are kind of like what it's like a really like a marriage song, like the vows and stuff. Yeah, exactly. But that album didn't do anything. It went, and so, in a perfect world, though. If America wasn't so much like with horse with binders on him, if they didn't say, well, who's the latest, what's
that's
the latest thing happening? Yeah, right. I mean, everything could have coexisted with everything else. Yeah. Because I mean, the millions of fans that you have, how do you neglect them and say, well, I'm sorry, but we're going to do this now?
Right.
But what about what they like, and what about if they love that album? And okay, so what about us, right? Yeah. And so they neglected those people, and it's millions of fans that would have loved that. Everything could have coexisted next to each other.
It could have. I mean, maybe some of the bands that were up here would have had to come to here, but having lived through that era, I know there were thousands of guys throughout the whole world that just were grumbling and really unhappy. Like devoted music guys like us that bought product, went to concerts, kept up with the scene. Everybody was miserable.
Exactly.
Miserable for like years. And they just didn't care. Like it was just like, fuck you guys. You're out.
Right.
Your bands are out. You're out. And everything that you've ever been involved with is out.
Exactly. All the hair bands, everything, regardless if you were good or not, everything that had, okay, you're out of it. We're looking at this new thing called rap and grunge coming out of Seattle.
Right.
And it destroyed all of the, even
and the grunge lasted for all of maybe 4 years. The whole scene of it. And
exactly.
Before it really petered out. So it wasn't even something you could say, wow, it had a lot of mileage. That was a scene like hard rock that lasted for 20 years. It was pretty much gone in 4 years. And they belly up the whole scene of hard rock in this country, which has never rebounded, as you know.
Exactly. It's never rebounded. Yeah, right. I mean, there's radio that still play like classic rock and all that. But they always play the same thing.
It's the same shit. Even on the Sirius satellite, it's the same shit over and over.
Yeah, same thing again. They never play like, I used to hear our song play like Show Me the Way or the other song I can't remember. Anyway, I used to hear it at one time. Real quick story. I remember when our first album came out, right? And the song was, oh God, what is... You have the CD in front of you,
I have the CD. I could read the song.
What's the first song?
The second song.
The first song. What is it?
You Keep Me Waiting, which is my favorite song.
You Keep Me Waiting. Hello.
I love that song.
Yes. And so that was... it wasn't that song. It was...
Well, that's the first song on this CD. I've got a lot to learn about love, which is another great song. Until you ruined it within the Raw.
Right. So that was the song that they were playing everywhere. And everybody was coming up to me going, oh my God, have you heard that? I said, no, I'd never heard of it. And so one day I was at Greg's house. They were gone. It was me by myself. and I had a 65 Mustang that I had just bought, and I was washing it. And I had my ghetto blaster out there hoping that I would hear that song. And all of a sudden it comes out. And I'm like jumping up and down, but I couldn't really like celebrate that event with anybody because I was by myself. And I was like, oh my God, it's like, you know, and it sounded so cool. And you know how it's compressed and you hear it on the radio. It was great. And I'll always remember that moment that, but.
So after the storm went under, what direction did you take at that point?
Well, I couldn't do much. I mean, I did the 2 fires with Kevin for Frontier Records. We did 2 CDs for Frontier Records.
Right, there's 3 of them. You're on the first 2.
Yes, exactly. And so I did that, and you know, there's not much I can do. And then I joined Hardline, which was Neal Schon's band. Right, I did that for like 15 years. We didn't do much shows, but I was on the 2nd CD, the 3rd CD, and the 4th CD.
Right.
With Hardline. And we did some shows in Europe and all that, but, you know.
And how was that with Jolie? He's become like a big sensation with Axel Rudy Pell now for the last 20 years.
Well, he has been. He was doing that and us at the same time.
Okay.
But it's, you know, it's like, okay, so what's happening is that a lot of singers, they will have a band in Italy, learn all the songs,
right,
and then they'll go there, they'll do a show, and they'll make all the money and pay these guys peanuts, right?
Exactly.
So Johnny was kind of trying to do that too, but a lot of the fans also loved me too. So, you know, he had to get me out there somehow. But after a while, shit hit the fan, and then I left the band, and so now he gets to do stuff with Italian musicians and do that.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the Hardline thing is it really wasn't so much Johnny as it was that lineup with Neal and Todd Jensen and Castronova. Exactly. So it's kind of a hard sell. I could see why he'd want you because you were an identifiable replacement for Neal, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because that was more of a band CD than like Johnny Gioli wasn't really somebody that carried that so much as all the other guys on that lineup.
Exactly. Right. And they were supposed to do another CD, but then Neal, you know how, well, you don't know, but he's like really, whatever he is happening at the time, he goes for it. Right, he jumped and went. I think he started doing stuff with Paul Rogers.
Right. Yeah.
Remember that whole Paul Rogers thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have that stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. So he went. They scratched the 2nd CD for Hardline, and then he went off and did that, and So.
And now, was it true that his involvement with Hardline is that he was dating their sister, the Gioli brothers? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
But the brothers didn't want him in the band because they didn't want the band to be like,
identified through him. Yeah,
exactly. Or they didn't want any sort of success because Neal was in the band. Right. And so Neal kept crying to the sister, I can't believe those guys don't want me in the band. Oh my God. So finally, all right already, come on in.
Right.
And so they did the Hardline thing, and then great album. I still have it.
Terrific album. An incredible production on that album.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, terrific album. Yeah. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your first solo album, which is a huge favorite of mine, with a singer that I always loved. How did you get involved with Mark White's? And if you could tell us about that CD, which I have always been a big fan of.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. So real quick, I wanted to do a CD with various singers, which Carlos Santana ended up doing with Supernatural. But before that, I was telling Serafino, the CEO of Frontiers, dude, I want to do a CD with different singers. And so he was like, well, yes, but how are you supposed to go and tour with all these singers? And I'm like, so that was his excuse, right? So I said, okay, screw it. Because I always wanted to do my own solo CD. So, damn it, what's the singer Foreigner now?
Kelly Hansen.
Kelly Hansen. He did that CD for me, and he wasn't doing anything, but he produced the whole thing for me. But he didn't want to sing on it. I go, dude, why don't you just sing it? No. And so I had another singer that actually sounded like Steve Perry, but he was a drunk guy and all that stuff, and didn't work out. One day, Kelly calls me up. He goes, dude, I just found a singer for you. He sounds like me. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, let me play something. And he played something that Mark had come in and did like a little demo thing. And I'm going, wow, that guy's great.
It's terrific.
Yeah. So that's how that CD came up. And yeah, the keyboard player on that CD, really nice guy. He ended up dying, but he was nice. We wrote a lot of the songs together, and I had 2 songs with the Satriani's bass player. What's his name?
Stu Ham.
Stu Ham. Yeah. Yes. Stu did 2 CDs. I mean, 2 songs. I'm just trying to think of that time. Yeah, I mean, it was great. I mean, I loved it. And yeah, Kelly produced that CD for me.
It's and I'm looking at it now. I didn't even realize. Yeah, engineered and mixed by and produced by Kelly Hansen. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Why hasn't Mark White's done more? He was in Eyes at one time, and I've always wondered why he hasn't done more. A terrific voice.
Yeah, he took over. Actually, Jeff Scott Soto was in Eyes too.
Right.
So he was like the second singer. So what happened was that CD came out, right? And we had like a little situation where Frontiers had sent me some CDs, and I thought they were going to send him some CDs too, but it turned out where I had either given my CDs to like companies that endorse me, so I didn't have enough, and so this whole thing came up. I always wanted to do a second CD with him, but then it didn't happen. But lately, though, Rock Vault in Las Vegas with Michael T. Ross, you know of that whole thing, right?
Yeah, rating the Rock Vault, yeah.
Exactly. I was able to tell Michael T. Ross to at least get Mark in there. And they did. They got him in there for a couple of gigs and stuff, but they change a lot of it. It's like a big, revolving door with Rock Vault.
Yeah. So
that was the last thing I heard from Mark Weiss. But then that was that. And then I think my second solo CD was it the one with Robert Fleischman?
I was going to ask you about Robert Fleischman's solo album.
I think that was my second one.
Yes.
Yeah. Because at the same time, I think I was doing the second Hardline.
Oh,
and
yeah, it's around the same time.
Right. And so, right. I started doing that CD when Johnny had contacted me and said if I wanted to finish the second Hardline, because they had a guitar player, Joey Tafoya.
Yes.
Which was wanting 5 to 6 weeks to do the solos. And Johnny was like, dude, we have 3 days until. So they got me, and I was able to do the solos, my version of the solos, in 3 to 4 days. And then so I got into Hardline because of that.
I think he plays with Graham Bonnet now, Joey Traffola, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, pretty sure.
Yeah.
What could you tell us about that Robert Fleischman album? Because for me, I love that album. I know it got slagged a lot because everybody thought it was going to be another Vinnie Vincent Invasion album, and it was nothing like that. But it's a terrific album. The songs are immense on it.
Well, at first I didn't know too much about Robert, and the fact that he was the first singer Journey after Greg Raleigh, right? And then they somehow. I've got this other story that Herbie Herbert always told me about Robert and Steve Perry, but then I got a hold of Michael Robinson. Actually, was working with Robert, this guy that was doing some stuff with Interscope. Frontier Records, and so. He goes, hey, man, do you want to do a CD with Robert Fleischman? And I'm like, why is that? Is he doing a CD? He goes, yeah. So I got introduced to that whole thing, and I started writing some songs, and then me and Robert actually hit it off pretty good. But I wasn't really familiar with his voice. But the thing I liked about Robert and my CD is that he came down with his vocals, and then he sounded like Peter Gabriel.
That's right.
On some of the songs, and I thought, wow, that's really cool. It wasn't until later that I saw some footage of Robert singing with Journey and Vinnie Vincent that I go,
screaming his brains out with Vinnie Vincent.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally
like,
screaming his brains out.
Yeah, I'm like, that can't be the same singer.
Yeah.
So
he did that stuff real good, though. He was a good screamer too.
Right, but I think so. What happened real quick with Journey was that they would tell Robert that he had some interviews, and so he would Robert would go from sound check to do these interviews, and then they would bring Steve Perry in to do sound check and to work out some of the songs that they had been working on. Right. That's what happened. And then so therefore, when the whole band goes, oh my God, we got to get Steve Perry in the band, they fired Robert, and then they got Steve Perry in.
And the thing with Robert is his vocals didn't really come into full bloom until later on. If what he was at that time, if they allowed him to grow into the singer he became, I'm not saying he would have been Steve Perry, but he would have been real good. He could. You know, he could have cut it.
Exactly. But again, you look back and God, I mean, Journey was basically an underground kind of a band until Steve Perry came in with that band, and they just catapulted to stardom, right?
They were very close to being dead in the water.
Exactly. Because they were kind of like not a prog band, but they were like a little underground.
Progressive, underground sound. Yeah.
Exactly. AC Dunbar was playing drums, and I saw them when I was a kid. I was up in the balcony with my binoculars, and I'm like, holy shit, there's Neal Schon. He had this big afro with a mustache. And then Greg Rowley, and then Ainsley Dunbar, Ross Valory. Yeah, that's amazing, man, that I could actually say that was I was in the balcony with binocs, and then years later I was in the same band with those guys, and I'm pinching myself going, holy shit, I'm writing a contract out here, and I'm in the storm with these same guys that I saw. Yeah, you know what I mean. That's
what was it like being with Raleigh? Because to me, Journey was never the same without him. I know a lot of people argue with me about that, but I loved the interplay of his voice with Perry, and once he was gone out of the band, that really didn't exist. It was all on Perry, and I always preferred his style of keyboard playing more so than Jonathan Cain. And I loved his voice, and I loved his whole vibe. I loved him in Santana. I loved all his solo stuff. What's your feelings on Greg?
Yes, well, Greg, I love that whole first, because it was kind of like, well, when Steve Perry joined the band, it was kind of like a back and forth, right? Greg,
which I loved.
Able to do, But then Steve, as he came more successful with the band, he didn't really want Greg singing anymore. He would kind of like, But then Greg at that time was ready to settle down and have kids.
Okay.
And like let go of the road and all that. And which he did. But at the same time, he was the one that recommended Jonathan Cain to the band, because the Babies had opened up for Journey a couple of times. And, as a keyboard player, you saw the other keyboard, you go, wow, that guy's pretty good. So, Jonathan comes in. And so there was that. And then I guess Greg, after he opened up a restaurant in Seattle, I think he also was partners with Neal. They said, wow, why don't we start a band? I guess because they had the itching again to like start something. And that was the beginning of Journey. And so that happened, that started. But I mean, I love the first 3 Journey albums, man. Look Into the Future, and that first one, and the third one.
Different stuff.
Oh yeah. Those were that was my favorite band back then. It was great. But Greg, I hate to say it, but it's almost like he never mentions the Storm in any interviews, and his discography doesn't really even say anything. And I don't want to say he's embarrassed because we were a great band, but I don't understand why he just doesn't feel the same way about us as he did about Journey. Even Kevin feels the same way, you know. We're like, why doesn't Greg, you know? And it's kind of hurtful and stuff, but I don't know. He's got his own reasons why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he sang some, you know, a lot of that. You talk about that interplay thing, right? With Kevin on the Storm stuff. So it wasn't like he wasn't, you know, getting that part of his, you know, and it wasn't just the keyboards. He had his vocals on there too.
Right, which is what he wanted. He wanted to recapture that thing that he had with Steve Perry in the beginning, where they both sang, and that's why the Storm was so great with Greg and Kevin singing, because it was almost like a throwback to what he did with Journey.
Yeah, right. You think he would have a fond memory of that, you know, and you know, love that stuff, but it's a shame.
Exactly.
Now you did 2 projects with 2 different singers that Mark and myself are very big fans of. One is which Tony Mills in a project called China Blue. If you could talk to us about that.
Well, we got to mention, because we're the Jersey guys, you know, and I live in a town away from where Eric Ragno grew up in Jersey City, New Jersey. So
I just saw Eric.
Yeah, he was at NAMM, right?
Yeah, I just saw him and said we took a picture together, and he said he texted me yesterday saying that I hope that we can work in a project together. So I knew him because he was on the my kind of like my second solo CD with, oh geez, what's his name? The singer that looks like Steve Perry.
Hugo.
Hugo.
Right, he played on that, of course. Yep.
Exactly. And so Eric played on that too. That's how I started working with Eric and stuff. And then afterwards, he said, hey, listen, I'm working on a project called China Blue with the singer that also did TNT, because he took over the other Tony.
Harnell.
Harnell's place. Harnell, yeah.
I just saw Tony Harnell this past Friday. He played in Jersey.
With the whole band or just by himself?
No, it was a solo show. He had a band, but not TNT.
Exactly. Anyway, so yeah, he said, hey, you want to do some like guitar work with China Blue? And then I ended up doing more than I thought I was going to do. Never met Tony Mills, talked to him 3 months before he died, because he was on my Many Sides. He was on one song on my last CD. And
that's right, yeah.
I talked to him about it. And actually, after he died, his wife told me that was the last song that he ever recorded. Really? Was the one on my album. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Great singer. Great.
He was a great singer. A very nice guy too. Very interactive, you know, with fans, and a really good guy. And Mark and myself have been huge fans of him from the 80s.
From Shy, he was in a band called
Shy. Yeah,
right?
Shy.
Yeah.
That's big favorites of ours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. My girlfriend and I were just talking about the China Blue. I think I have one China Blue CD, but it's a Japanese version, and it's all the plastic is still around it and everything. and I texted Eric to see if he had an extra China Blue for me. But that was a great CD, man. I drove to LA and stayed at Eric's house, and you know, recorded all that stuff there.
Nice.
Yeah, it was nice.
What was your how did your involvement with Hugo? How did you guys partner up?
So Eric and I were looking for a singer, and somehow we got a hold of Hugo. And obviously, you know, him being in a Journey tribute band, and he had heard of me, and so he obviously wanted to work with me, with working with, you know, the Journey guys. We wrote some songs. Eric and I wrote songs together. And then we sent them to Hugo, and then he wrote the words, and then he would send them back. And so we started that way. And so I went to LA to start recording. And we did that with Johnny Macaluso, he's drummer. He played with Ingve, Johnny Macaluso.
Yep.
Great drummer, great guy.
Oh, he's a powerhouse.
Talk like that. He's great. And it was him and me, and Fabrizio, who was our producer. He played bass on there too. Eric played keys. And so what happened was that the vocals didn't really turn out that good by Hugo flying in his vocals. So Fabrizio said, listen, man, we got to get you here. So he flew to LA and they were able to record the vocals there in LA. But yeah, man, I mean, God, there's times where that guy really sounds like Steve Perry.
Oh yeah.
On that Hugo CD. Again, never met him. Like Tony Mills, talked to him on the phone. But yeah, I mean, that album came out pretty nice, and yeah, that was a nice experience doing that too.
Nice. So
yeah.
let's go on to your most recent solo album. You had, again, a bunch of you talked about it before. You always wanted to do something like that with a lot of different singers and stuff, and you finally got to do that with the last solo album.
Right. So that was my first, like, that's what I've always wanted to do before my first CD came out with. So this time I was able to tell Serafino, listen, I just want to do a CD with a bunch of singers. So Fabrizio, again, the guy that had done the Hugo Ramos with me, he had some singers, who did he have? Oh, he brought in some singers. I brought in Eric Martin, Harry Hess, Tony Mills, some great singers. Anyway,
Danny Vaughan.
Terry from
Danny Vaughan. Exactly. I brought in Terry. He brought in Danny Vaughan. So between me and him, we got this whole thing. I had talked to Robin McCauley because of Rock Vault. He was going to do something, but he had some emergency with some flooding at his house, so he couldn't do it.
Yeah, Joe Retta on there.
Joe Retta, exactly.
He's a great singer.
He was supposed to do the whole CD, and so he was in the other band, Heaven and Earth.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so there was a conflict of interest because Dave, what was the guitar player's name?
Stuart Smith.
Stuart Smith, exactly. He had like bitched them out or something for trying to, for like, well, why would you want to do vocals on that? You're supposed to be doing vocals with us and all that shit.
I mean, what did he think it is? 1986? Like they're on like a big tour and a record contract? I mean, come
exactly, on. Right?
What a dick.
I know. So it just came up, like Joe said, okay, listen, man, just to keep the peace, I could do 3 or 4 songs. And I go, all right. And then that's when Fabrizio and me said, well, we got to fill this with other singers. Let's try to bring in some other singers. That's how that whole thing happened. So I had brought in Eric Martin and again, Tony Mills and, some other guys that he did too. And that's how it came out. But God, I wanted a bigger production on that CD, right? But Fabrizio had a problem with doing a melodic thing again. And he's Italian. He knows those guys at Frontiers. But he thought I should reinvent my sound and try to, and so I went along with it. I said, yeah, I guess, okay, right. Even though the songs were good, most of the songs are pretty good actually, but it wasn't the way I play, right? It wasn't the way I really would have done things. But again, it was great to be able to be, on a CD with all those great singers that I look up to.
Yeah.
And what held back the production on that? Because I remember when it came out, it got some criticisms about the production, and I got the CD anyway because I've always been a fan of your stuff, and I was pleasantly surprised. It was somewhat underproduced, but I'm not a big fan of overproduced anyway, so it didn't really bother me. What were the holdbacks on production with that?
Well, Jesus Christ. Sorry, I dropped my phone.
Okay.
Are you guys still there?
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah, so it was the same thing, right? It was like Fabrizio wanted like a whole new thing, like a whole new sound, right?
Oh, so that was kind of his direction with the production?
Yeah, right. And, you know, I wanted a more slamming rock drummer, but we ended up using this guy in Nashville that does a lot of session work. I mean, he's a good drummer, but I wanted the high fucking Tommy Lee. I'm sorry.
Right, you wanted that big. Right, you wanted that big sound. Yeah,
that big rock sound. You know, the Tommy Lee and that kind of stuff.
Tommy Aldridge and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Type of big tom sound.
That's right. I wanted that, but I got that, which he is a good drummer, but it wasn't the production. And then I don't know, Fabrizio. I don't know if it was a lot of him wanting to go in a different direction and then not have that melodic 80s thing, because he kept saying, well, I don't want a 80s, you know. And so it was a lot of that.
But if you're going to bring those singers on, I mean, that's what you know, you don't bring the, if you're going to go reinvent, you're not going to bring on all these guys from 80s bands as singers. I mean, you know, it's kind of like a contradiction on his part.
Exactly. I agree totally with you. Yeah, these guys are 80s rockers.
They're all very recognizable singers from the late 80s, early 90s. So, you know.
Exactly. I know. But one good thing about it was the fact that Fabrizio was working with Gibbons. What's his name? From ZZ Top, right?
Billy Gibbons.
Yeah, because he plays with him too. And one day, I wasn't there, but one day he was mixing some stuff, and it was the song that Tony Mills is on. And Billy Gibbons was listening to it, and he goes, wow, he's a good guitar player. He sounds like Steve Lukather. And then when Fabrizio told me that, I went, oh my God, what? Billy Gibbons heard me?
And he thinks you sound like Steve Lukather.
Hello.
That's a nice
compliment.
That ain't bad.
Yeah. I mean, right. I wanted to meet him, and because another guitar player that I would love to meet. But I agree that the production, and a lot of people also said the production, that, you know, it felt like it wasn't up to par for something that I've done in the past, and the productions that I've had, even with Fabrizio doing the Hugo Ramos, that was a different production. It was more what I'm about, right?
Right.
The rock stuff, the melodic rock.
Yes.
But yeah. So now, real quick, now I'm trying to do another CD, but these singers that I keep, like Oni from Mob Lynch, Mob, right?
Yeah, Oni Logan.
Yes, he was Michael T. Ross from Rock Vault. Oni was doing some stuff, right?
Yeah.
Not anymore. He just went in there for a couple of weeks, did that, and he's gone. But I was talking to Michael about, God, I've always loved that guy's voice, man. I would love to do something. And so I talked to him a couple of times, you know, on the phone, but it just seemed like he had a lot of other stuff going on. And I mean, I don't want to say he was flaky or anything, but you know, I did leave him messages on his phone and stuff. He never called me back. And then I had to call Michael, what's going on with this guy? And then he would call me, you know, that whole thing. So it never happened. So Frontiers, they said that they would call me when they had a project in mind. And I really haven't been able to get a singer, because a lot of the singers that I want to do something with, Frontiers has a problem with. Like, what's that singer, Mark St. James?
Kevin,
is it Kevin St. James? What is it? St. James. He played with he did some stuff with Ronnie Montrose.
Yeah.
Some stuff with
Kevin St. John. Kevin St. John.
Yes, right. He did some stuff with Rain, that Rain band with Doug Aldrich on it.
Burning Rain.
Band? Burning Rain.
Oh, you're talking about
St. James.
Keith St.
St.
John.
John.
Keith St. John.
Keith St. John.
Exactly.
Keith St. John. That guy is tremendous.
Well, I was talking to him on the phone. Really cool. We got along great. I sent Frontiers an email saying, no, I don't want to work with that guy anymore. I guess
he did a lot of stuff with them. He's been on, dating back to the late 90s, he was on stuff that was on Frontiers.
Right. but they must have had some sort of fallout because they didn't want to work with them anymore. And I'm like, all right.
He's been touring with Kingdom Come for the last couple of years.
Right.
It started like right before the pandemic. It got interrupted, and then he did more shows. He took over the part of Lenny Wolf with all the Kingdom Come guys. But he's got a tremendous voice, that guy.
No, he is cool. And he looks good on stage.
Yes, yeah, he's got a great look, too.
Yeah, but then Lenny, it's weird because back in 1983, God, I was living in LA and I auditioned with Kingdom Come. And it was Lenny singing. Yeah, it was Lenny singing. That guy Kotak's on drums. And, but I don't know. I think, and I don't want to say this, but the band was not good looking, and only Lenny was kind of cool looking. And I almost feel like
there were a lot of ugly guys in that band. There's no question. That guy Rick Steyer was frightening looking. Yeah,
right.
I don't give a shit.
And I look good.
No, you always had a good look.
I looked good back then too. Yeah, I think that they didn't get me because Lenny didn't want like maybe competition in the band or something. I don't know. But another story, I auditioned with Kiss when I was 17 years old.
Really?
They flew me to LA from Chicago. My friend Mickey Free was managed by Diana Ross. Gene Simmons was going out with Diana Ross at the time.
Right, and Mickey Free was kind of interrelated with Paul Stanley, right?
Yeah. Yes. And he was in a band called Shalimar.
Right.
So they were all friends.
Right.
They were auditioning before Vinnie Vincent. And he said, my friend Josh, young guitar player, he's great. So they flew me to LA, Sunset Boulevard at SR whatever studios. SIR. And I walk in and I meet Gene Simmons with no makeup on, briefcase.
Talk about frightening.
His hair in a ponytail.
He could have been in Kingdom Come.
Dude, I know. Very, very business. Like, hello, Josh Ramos. Yes, I'm Gene Simmons, and I was like, holy shit. And so then there was two other guitar players that were going to audition, and they auditioned them first, and then they brought me in. And I learned like 3-4 songs. Strutter was one of the songs that I learned, and that was when they had Eric, that one drummer that died, Eric
Carr.
Yeah.
Eric Carr. Sweetheart. God, that guy was so
everybody
cool.
said he was a great guy.
Oh my God, really nice. And so, and Paul Stanley had just gotten there from the dentist and he apologized, but he had leather pants. He looked like so cool, like a rock star. And I'm like, whoa, Paul Stanley, all without makeup.
Yeah.
And he said, hey, Josh, what's up? Hey, you want to play? Yeah, let's do it. So we did the 3 songs and I was like, okay, that's it. Well, and then they go, are you warmed up? And I go, yeah. He goes, well, let's do it again. And I'm like, yes. So we did the songs again and it was great. And they said, okay, well, obviously our manager will give you a call and everything. And then Mickey took me to the China Club, took me to the Rainbow for the first time. I met all these people. He had a friend with a Rolls Royce that we drove in, and oh my God, it was so magical and great. So about a week later, I went back to Chicago and stuff, and the management called, said, hey, the guys want to let you know that you were great, and it was a hard decision, but we went with Vinnie Vincent, and so that was that.
We knew Mickey Free from his involvement with John Beauvoir.
Yes, Crown of Thorns or something, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Great guy. That guy. Actually, Kevin and I flew to England, and he presented us with the award that they were giving out. Beauvoir gave us the award on stage, Kevin and I. Yeah, really, really cool.
And Beauvoir has always had some intertwining relationships with Kiss also in the past.
Oh, really?
Yeah, songwriting and absolutely.
Oh, yeah, he wrote a few songs.
Yeah, because we saw him a lot. He played in a small club in Jersey a couple of years ago. We saw him, and he talked about that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, different songs that he wrote with them, and I think actually quite a few songs he might have written for them. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, nice guy. I didn't spend too much time with him, but I mean,
great Mohawk, right?
Oh yeah, the white mohawk.
Yeah, priceless.
Like
yeah.
the guy from the Plasmatics.
Yes,
That's him.
That was he.
He was in the
no.
he was in the later stages of the play. He's not the original guy, but he played with Wendy O. Williams in the Plasmatics. Absolutely,
exactly.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yep,
it was
absolutely.
It wasn't a Panic, the guy in the
Doug
black
Pennick from
face.
King's X.
Doug
No,
Pennick.
not Panic.
Yeah,
yeah. He had a mohawk, and the other guy in the Plasmatic, Richie Stotts, the guitar player, he had a mohawk too. Yeah,
that's right. Yes. Oh.
Oh, that was good stuff, Josh. Man, Tom and I mean, this is a great stories. It was really cool catching up with you and hearing some of this stuff. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for reaching out to me. And I mean, I don't do these interviews hardly anymore. Only when I have a new CD, then I do interviews. But thank you so much for reaching out.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, hey, you said you're trying to get something going, but if it ever happens, we'll have to have you back on.
Please. Yeah. If I ever get another thing happening with Frontiers or something else. I know Mikey was talking about another record label that they might want to do something. So, I mean, as a musician, you want to keep busy and you want to keep playing. And so I'm glad that, we connected. So, yeah.
Definitely.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. It was like we know you for 20 years.
Yes.
Yeah, right?
Chicago, Jersey guys,
That's right.
It worked out fine.
Wow, you're right in Bon Jovi and Bruce Springsteenville, huh?
Springsteen actually grew up literally 3 blocks away from where I'm in Freehold. Yeah. I mean, I'm only out here 2 years. I'm actually a Brooklyn guy, not a Jersey guy.
Can you tell?
Right, as you can.
Right, exactly.
You would never figure out to have a Brooklyn accent. Right?
Never. Never.
So I'm not much of a Jersey guy. Mark has been out here for his whole life, but
okay,
I'm displaced out here. But I'm in Freehold, and that's where Springsteen literally grew up 3 miles, less than 3 miles from where I live.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you guys ever do any interviews with any great singers and stuff, and they're looking for somebody, let them know about me.
All right, we'll throw them your way for sure.
Keith St. John would be great.
Yeah.
That guy has got a powerful voice. Only Logan too, yeah. But Oni hasn't done anything really. He did a Lynch Mob album, I want to say about 6 years ago, and that was the last thing he's actually done. I know he's been in that Rock Vault on and off.
Nice.
All right, you guys.
All
have
right.
a great night.
All right, Josh. Appreciate
nice talking to you. Take care.
Yeah, you guys. All right. Have a good night.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.